Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you doing today? I hope you said great. Today we are going to talk about a very sad story. When I was a kid, I grew up with the last name Lee, and so my family, my dad would show me Bruce Lee movies, and I would end up, seeing pretty much every Bruce Lee movie before I was even 8 years old. So when his son Brandon came out in the movie Rapid Fire, I was immediately a fan and loved the movie because it was very martial arts based, and was very excited to hear about him doing what he would describe in an interview I had seen as a supernatural movie called The Crow. Unfortunately, while making that movie in Wilmington, North Carolina, he would end up passing away by a freak accident on set. I feel like a lot of people don't know much about Brandon, so I want to tell a little bit about him and then take you over to the studio where that accident happened and tell you what happened. Daze with Jordan the Lion, it begins now. Now, Brandon Lee, of course, was the only son of who many consider to be the greatest martial artist of all time, the great Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee would take all of his favorite things from each fighting style, each martial arts style, and he would create his own style of martial arts called Jeet Kune Do, and he would end up teaching basically anyone that came into contact with him that wanted to learn, he would teach them. And so when Brandon was a little kid, a lot of times people out at the Lee home would be coming out. They were celebrities, they were famous people coming out to learn, and Brandon would go out there and be trained along with them. So he would say from the time he was able to walk, he was learning martial arts from his father. Now, unfortunately, his father, they would come back and forth, but they primarily, from the time Brandon was 3 months old on, would live in Hong Kong. So Brandon said they lived there until after his father died. Now, his father, he also had a very crazy death. He died of basically a reaction to some pills that he had taken, but it was always kind of rumored that there was a curse or that he was killed by the Chinese mafia, the triads, that there was something involved and that it wasn't an accident. But after the death of his father, he said that his mother moved him and his sister back to America, and they actually he was very, very Chinese. He said he went to private school there where they only spoke Cantonese. He said in the home they would speak English, but he said it wasn't until they came after his father's death that he would get Americanized. He said the way he did that was his neighbors a couple of doors down were his father's friend Chuck Norris and his sons, and he said it was actually Chuck Norris's sons Michael and Eric that would help make Brandon more Americanized. Now, what was really surprising about Brandon's life is that he actually was the president of his student body when he went to school here in America, but he was thrown out of school. He said they actually gave him a paper that said he was poisonous to the student body. He said he just thought, they were used to really having someone in there that just arranged like cleanup days, and he actually was wanting to have like council meetings talking about how to improve the school and everything, and he said so they asked him to leave. So he said since he had a little bit of family money, he just started hitchhiking for the next year with nothing but a tent, and he said he would go up and down the coast, occasionally calling his mom, letting her know that he was safe and that he was alive, because he said during that year the California had gotten a lot of rains. But he said when he finished that up, he got a regular job in a restaurant, got his GED, then enrolled in college, quit college within a year, got a job working for a producer, and started auditioning. He decided he wanted to audition, but actually when he was 13, he picked up martial arts again. He had learned some from his dad, but he said when his dad died, he gave it up when they moved to America. But then when he was about 13, his dad's top student, Dan Iasanto, became his sensei basically and taught him. And so Brandon said his first gig was in a made-for-TV movie about the David Carradine Kung Fu, and he was playing David Carradine's long-lost son. That's how he got his SAG card. Now John and I are going to take you over to where they filmed The Crow, and unfortunately where the accident happened that took Brandon's life. Right over here you can see this is Cinespace Studios, but at the time in 1993, March 31st, 1993, this was Carol Co. And the production of The Crow was starting its last week in production. So this accident happened on stage 4. People had said that this production they felt like was cursed because there was a day on production where an electrician got almost electrocuted. A friend of mine, Richard, actually talked to that guy. So the guy still works on the sound stages and everything here. But also like 2 other people got hurt that day. So they were saying it was cursed and they were working what they thought were extreme hours, 18 hours back to back, sometimes working weeks of 6 days a week. So they felt like maybe people were overworked, and they basically had a majority of the production finished. They had all the main action shots. They just needed a few transitional things, and it was at 12:31. They were filming the scene. It was basically Brandon was playing Eric Draven, who's the Crow, and he's coming in to his home with groceries, and he and his girlfriend are killed by people that are robbing their home. And he was Michael Massey is the actor who actually shot what was supposed to be a gun with blanks, and a projectile ended up hitting Brandon in the abdomen and he went down. They ended up rushing him to the hospital and doing an emergency surgery, but it just wasn't able to save him. And the actor, Michael Massey, said he truly believed that this was like one of those things that was as much of an accident as anything ever could be, because he said what the autopsy found was that the gun that they used had been used in a scene before, and a piece of the bullet that was in from the last scene was jammed in the gun. They didn't know it, and when they fired what was supposed to be a blank out of the gun towards Brandon, that piece of shrapnel came out of the gun, and actually that's what shot and killed Brandon. But Michael Massey said it was such a real true accident, because he said I wasn't even supposed to be handling the gun. It wasn't until right before we did the scene that was changed to do that. That projectile should have never been in there. It was like a freak accident. At one point I think they were much like the Rusk situation. They were kind of thinking of a murder investigation. Really sad, really, really sad, because it almost mirrored Bruce Lee's last movie, Game of Death, where they're a bunch of men with stunt guns and one is loaded with a real bullet to shoot him. So Brandon, unfortunately, at the age of 28, passed away. He was so excited to do this movie. It was such a turning point for him, and he was a week after this happened, when the production was supposed to wrap, he was supposed to get married. So he never got to have any children. Lost his life. Just the age of 28 years old. And of course, then people talked about the Lee family curse. And he's buried with his father in Seattle. When he was, he was raised for like the first 3 months in Oakland, because that's where Bruce was born. But they're both buried in Seattle, and I'm going to include some of my video from when I went to visit their graves here. Rest in peace, Brandon Lee. They're actually making now a new Crow movie with Bill Skarsgård. Probably going to be pretty good. The hospital they took Brandon to was about 12 or 13 minutes away. I was kind of surprised it was that far. We made our way over to New Hanover Regional Medical Center. here in Wilmington. This is where Brandon was brought and worked on, operated on for 6 hours before they finally pronounced him dead. Sadly, what ended up happening, what they figured out, or what was described as happening, was during the fatal scene, he was supposed to have a revolver shooting dummy cartridges, but they were replaced with blank rounds, and it contained a powder charge and primer, but no solid bullet, allowing the gun to be fired with sound and flash effects without the risk of an actual projectile. However, the gun was not properly checked and cleared before firing, and the dummy bullet previously lodged in the barrel from the scene before was propelled forward by the blank's propellant and shot out of the muzzle with almost the same force as if the round were live, striking Brandon Lee in the abdomen. So it was actor Michael Massey. He was in the scene supposedly they were there beating up and robbing Eric Draven's girlfriend and then shooting him, Brandon Lee, when he walked in with the groceries. And when he shot Brandon fell backwards instead of forwards like he was supposed to. So the director yelled cut, and Brandon didn't stand up like he was supposed to, and they thought he was joking. Then they noticed the closer they came to him that he was unconscious but heavily breathing. So they immediately checked to see if he hit his head or anything, and then when they felt his pulse, it was regular, but then it started to slow down and stopped. So paramedics brought him here, and sadly that's where it ended.
It's bright and sunny, and we're here, and we're gonna see Bruce and Brandon Lee's grave today.
Well, here they are, Bruce and Brandon, both early passings, both accidental passings. Brandon, of course, was the Crow and the son of Bruce Lee, and you can see it's Brandon Bruce Lee. And then here's Bruce. He had problems with his disc, so he was on muscle relaxants since the 60s, and they kind of say that was, he had been doing those for so many years, that was partially what ended up accidentally killing him. He was, the day of his death, he was meeting with George Lazenby about a movie he was going to do, and he had been having problems with headaches and seizures before that. He had been filming or doing overdubs for Enter the Dragon and had passed out, and so they were having to monitor him a little bit, but he went to an actress's house and they were meeting about a movie. They were reading over scripts, and he started having a headache, and she gave him a medicine that was kind of an aspirin mixed with a tranquilizer, and it had a bad effect on the prescription he was on, and he ended up having well, they said death by misadventure was originally what it was ruled, and they even tried to say because he had cannabis in his system that had a part in it, but it was just a bad reaction that made his brain swell. He died. Over on Brandon's it says, because we don't know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well, yet everything happens a certain number of times in a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood, some afternoon that's so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it? Perhaps 4 or 5 times more, perhaps not even that. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20? And yet it all seems limitless. For Brandon and Eliza, forever joined in true love's beauty. And of course, Eliza was Brandon's soon-to-be wife. And the reason that they put this was because this is a passage that Brandon loved and was going to use for their wedding. And he had quoted it in an interview before this, so they thought it was very fitting.
Even though Brandon Lee loved to do all the martial arts scenes and everything, he prided himself in doing that, he always did use stunt doubles for things that were dangerous. And so to complete this movie, even though they had a majority of the major things that they needed, they did use someone to fill in the distant shots and things that they needed to complete the film. Thank you all for watching. Rest in peace, Brandon Lee. We will see you next time. from Wilmington, North Carolina, goodbye.